What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Young Rich Podcast. And today we do have a lot to discuss. Today I will be solo dolo. Seth is on a family vacation, so shout out to him. Hopefully he's enjoying his vacation, but I know he's tuned in, locked in. We've discussed a couple things to be talking about while he is away. And we do keep up with all the stuff going on, all the offseason moves. But today is going to be a very interesting podcast today. I did want to go over Caleb Williams' expectations this year, this upcoming season. I wanted to talk about, I saw Colin, shout out to Colin Cowherd for this idea, discussing the best over-unders in this year. NFL season, right? And all I do is overs, so you know what I'm saying? Unders is just a different story. You always want to root for some of the teams to go over, but respectfully, I think I got some good decisions here. We're going to discuss the whole Brandon Aiyuk situation. Finally, a trade is starting to develop here, so we'll discuss that a little bit. But the last and most important thing to discuss today is the NFL Top 100 list. I mean, the NFL Top 100 list, if you don't pay attention to it, is just absolutely insane. You know, there's a couple names that didn't make it that should have. There's a couple players that, you know, were a little high compared to what you would have thought. But, you know, to get into the NFL Top 100 list, I did a little research, and apparently the NFL All-Pro list is actually voted on during the season, right before you get to what I believe it's after Christmas, around that time. And so, you know, it kind of makes sense why some of the players were higher than they are now, and some guys were lower, and et cetera, and some guys weren't in. So that's a lot to get. That's a different perspective to kind of look at it as, because obviously that's something I didn't know. So hearing that that's how it gets voted on, and when it gets voted on, you know, injuries do play a part of some people's, you know, rankings and how they're looked upon. You know, but definitely still a lot of snubs. And a couple things to take out in that. But again, that's something we'll get into later in today's episode. But first things first, I wanted to discuss the Caleb Williams situation, his expectations for this upcoming year. Okay. I mean, listen, the schedule, I'm going to pull it up. All right. I got to be more prepared on this because I'm trying to pull it up as we're going along. But to discuss the Caleb Williams schedule, right? I mean, listen, first things first, obviously, you know, you just brought in Keelan Allen. You traded him. He can't. The Chargers wanted to take him to take a pay cut. He didn't want to take a pay cut. Here he is. You have a great receiving core. You went all offense in the draft. You just brought in Rome Odunze, who's, you know, the third best receiver in this draft, right? Some said he could have been the second or first best receiver in this class. Absolutely dominant out of Washington, right? Great, you know, big time physical receiver. I think he's going to fit well alongside Caleb Williams, and not a lot of pressure on him to perform off the rip. Then you have Cole Kmet, one of the best young tight ends coming in last year, right? You have DeAndre Swift, who I believe was a very underrated player this offseason. You know, what he did in Philadelphia with the touches he was given, I thought he was phenomenal. He's a very versatile back. He can catch the ball at the backfield. I mean, he is 5'8", 5'9", but he's 205, 210. So he's a very, you know, physical, very powerful back. He has a lot more weight to him than most people would think. And there was a lot of times last year, specifically with DeAndre Swift, in the whole Philadelphia Eagles situation, where myself personally, was begging for them to give him the ball more, let him run the ball. And it just always came down to when, you know, you needed to keep the ball out of the opponent's hands, and it's that fourth quarter, you know, 5 minutes left, 4 minutes left, you just got to get first downs to move the chains. He would come through, make big time plays week in and week out, and they would just wait way too long to start getting him involved more, you know. And I understand there's a lot of people you have to feed, a lot of mouths to feed on that team, you know, especially with Dallas Goedert coming back later in that season, right? And you had some, you know, some issues offensively throughout this year. Obviously, you've seen the collapse, right? But so he's a very underappreciated back, and I think he'll fit very great alongside Caleb Williams, a guy who can catch out the backfield and be a good safety blanket, and then Cole Kmet as well, just a guy, you know, who can just be a reliable safety blanket. You know, he was there for Justin Fields. He made it easier for Justin Fields, and I think Caleb Williams can really take advantage of that, right? You revamped this offensive line. You know, it's not the best, but it's definitely an improvement from what you had last year, right? Defensively, you have Jalen Johnson, who was an All-Pro this past year. You just paid him. You just extended him. You brought in Montez Sweat, and since Montez Sweat has come into this defense, your defense turned into a top 15, top 12 defense, and Montez Sweat did get extended. So I'm liking the way this team is forming at this current moment. You know, I'd like to see maybe another corner alongside Jalen Johnson to get smacked in there. You did lose Eddie Jackson, who I think is going to be, I mean, that's a veteran guy. He was a great player for you guys, had a lot of great years. Unfortunately, he was no longer to stay, right? But when you get into this whole Caleb Williams Rookie of the Year conversation, the expectations for Caleb Williams, everyone is saying he is Patrick Mahomes 2.0. He is Patrick Mahomes upcoming. You've got guys talking about Caleb Williams could possibly make the Super Bowl as a rookie. Like they are setting such high expectations on his shoulders. He's also done a little bit of that himself, with saying he wants to chase greatness. He wants to chase Brady. He wants to be a legend. He's setting these expectations, these bars so high for himself, right? He did it in college just a little bit, said he wanted to be great, said he wanted to win a national championship, didn't get that done, but he won a Heisman, was the best quarterback in college football on one of the worst rosters last year as a junior, one of the biggest NIL names in college sports last year, so for him, right, listen, I don't think Caleb Williams is going to win Rookie of the Year, because I think there's a lot of stuff that he has to work on to improve, and he's got the season to work on it, right? So I'm not expecting him to come out here, win a Super Bowl, or make it to a Super Bowl, even, win a playoff game, I just want him to get better. I think he's got all the talent in the world, right? This year, it's going to be a very much easier adjustment period to the NFL compared to some other quarterbacks, but one of the biggest things he's got to understand, because he's been doing it all his career, everywhere he's been at, it's all offense, no defense, having a defense alongside you and having great weapons alongside you is just going to be easier. His last year in USC, you had one of the worst O-lines in the Pac-12. You had the worst defense in college football. You know what I'm saying? If Caleb Williams didn't score on one drive, we'd be down 14 points just like that. We got into a lot of shootouts last year. It was a lot of him trying to turn something into nothing, and you've seen it all year. His best wide receiver was Brendan Rice, who, sure, got drafted in the 6th round of the Chargers. Maybe there's something there, but he was not a legitimate receiver threat. There was a lot of opportunities, a lot of drop balls that he could have made, but he didn't, right? And then his number 2 option was Taj Washington, who he's 5'9", you know what I'm saying? Very undersized receiver. And then you look at Zachariah Branch, one of the most electric players in college football, but he was hurt. He missed a lot of time this year, and as the later in the season came through, you started seeing him, not get involved as much. So there was a lot of issues with him in college, but I expect him to... Jaden Daniels is still my Rookie of the Year favorite. I think he's more prepared. He's more, if you watch his film, a lot of his stuff is on time. A lot of him is playing in the pocket, right? And his ability to run and use his legs was not, his first instinct. His first instinct was sit in the pocket, use those great weapons, and Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors, right? One of the highest scoring offenses in the NFL in college last year, right? And then his ability to run just made him so much more versatile, right? Heisman Trophy winner last year, an absolute dominant talent, he's just a great player, and I think he's going to be more day one ready than Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams has to learn how to adjust, how to play on time, how to not need to, getting the ball out, timing routes, and allowing your great receivers to make plays for you. There's times when you have to extend plays, use your feet, but there's also times where you can stay in the pocket, step up, pocket movement, pocket presence. So there's a lot of stuff that he does have to work, specifically just him being in the pocket, being on time, those little things, but he can make any throw in the book. He can make these, Mahomes-like throws where he's throwing off his back foot or he's throwing across his body and just throwing at different arm angles. He can make every throw in the book, right? He has the arm talent. He's a dual threat guy. He's not so much faster, but he's definitely bigger. He can, hopefully he doesn't take as many hits in the NFL as he did in college. I would like to see that. But listen, what people have to understand is for the Chicago Bears, a quarterback coming in here throwing for 3,500 yards and 25 touchdowns is a franchise record. He can go in here, throw for 3,500 yards, and be the best quarterback in Chicago Bears history, right? And I get it. He's probably going to, hit those numbers, right? I'm not going to say smash those numbers, but he's probably going to hit those numbers with the offensive, firepower they added to this team, right? So I expect him to meet those marks and be, quote unquote, the best Chicago Bears quarterback in NFL in their franchise history, right? They have not had good luck at quarterback. So for me, it's all about, just going in the right direction for this franchise. Yes, you won 7 games last year. Maybe you win 8, you win 9. Maybe you make the playoffs, right? But you look at this team and what his, everyone's out here saying he's got to be phenomenal. He's got to be CJ Stroud. He's got to be better than CJ Stroud as a rookie. What CJ Stroud did was one of one. Listen, I'm not going to say nobody, right? But very few quarterbacks come into the NFL like that and dominate from day one like CJ Stroud did. CJ Stroud did something that no other quarterback has done, in a very, very long time. Justin Herbert, he came in and dominated. He played great football coming in, but he didn't win as much as CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud won a playoff game as a rookie. He won his division as a rookie, right? So there's just the different situations, different expectations, and just, I don't want anybody coming out here to make Caleb Williams seem like if he doesn't have a year like CJ Stroud did last year, that it's a failure of a season. If he doesn't make the playoffs, it's a failure of a season. I just need him to develop and take his time here. It's not a, it's not a marathon. Let's get you developed. Let's get you adjusted to the NFL. I'm not worried about anything else, right? And then you look at because I know the playoff situation is something that teams want to look at, right? But you look at his schedule this upcoming year, and excuse me, and if you look at last year, I mean, they lost a lot of close games. They lost they blew 3 double-digit fourth quarter leads last year with Justin Fields, right? Three double-digit fourth quarter leads last year, which is just something you cannot do. Which having a guy like Caleb Williams, who's not, who can throw the ball better than Justin Fields, I think is going to help this team. So this team is going to be in a great situation to win, right? If they, for whatever reason, they don't make the playoffs, I'm not disappointed because it takes everybody different. It takes everybody different time to develop and get used to the NFL. So my expectations for him are just to show the type of caliber of player he is, right? Show some flashes of greatness and just continue to get better week by week. By weeks 18, we'll be having a different conversation. But if you look at their schedule, right, they've got a very front-loaded, easier schedule, right? You play the Tennessee Titans, which you don't know what you got in Will Levis, right? You play the Houston Texans in Houston. That's a tough game. You play the Colts, who is another scrappy game, but again, that's still a winnable game, right? You have the Los Angeles Rams, a winnable game, right? They don't look very dominant right now. That's a team that should surprise teams this year, but then you still play Carolina, you still play Jacksonville, you play Washington Commanders, you play Arizona, you play New England, right? Those are all winnable games that you could really get the nerves out. You can get right, get used to the NFL, get caught up, speed up the process, and then that's when you start hitting your division games, right? You play all your division games in the last 8 weeks of the season, which it's going to be a dogfight, right? But again, you're playing against Jordan Love, you're playing against Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions, who just made it to the NFC Championship game, who blew a second half lead and didn't allow themselves to go to the Super Bowl. Like this division is not easy. And then Minnesota, a great offensive minded head coach. They won 7 games last year with 4 different quarterbacks. Like, listen, that division is so damn good now. Like it's just we don't know what to expect. All right. So if Caleb Williams goes out here and misses the playoffs because the Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love win 10 games and the Detroit Lions win 12, it's just a tough situation to be in, and to hold it against him like that if he doesn't make the playoffs as a rookie, it's just a lot, you know what I'm saying? Patrick Mahomes didn't even play as a rookie, right? Okay, so let's just look at that example. Patrick Mahomes didn't play as a rookie, Tom Brady didn't play as a rookie, right? So all this stuff, it's going to be okay. And Peyton Manning, another great guy, struggled as a rookie, you know what I'm saying? More interceptions than touchdowns that year, okay? So again, I just want him to take strides in the right direction, and as long as he continues to get better, he'll be in a good place, right? I'm riding with him, right? I'm a USC fan. I'm a diehard, so this is my guy. I'm hoping to see him succeed. I want all my guys from USC to succeed in the NFL, right? But then you get into the conversation about the Chicago Bears and their Hard Knocks, right? Their Hard Knocks episode did release actually 30 minutes before I started recording this video, so I will watch it when I'm leaving the studio, you feel me? But so that's something I will be looking at right after this show, or excuse me, after this episode. But I did want to discuss the kind of expectations and now how does it feel for Caleb Williams to get that type of limelight, that spotlight, you know what I'm saying? Caleb Williams, a rookie with this much hype, does the Hard Knock situation help or hurt him, right? And I mean, listen, you've seen the New York Giants situation, their whole Hard Knocks, their draft series, the offseason in the New York Giants shoes, right? If you haven't, there's just a lot of, behind the curtain stuff, things that maybe you wouldn't like people to see, or attitude problems. There's a lot of different X's and O's that happen in closed doors that most people don't get to hear, right? It's different when you don't get to hear it, right? But then when you get everything's public, right? Everything you say and do can and will be used against you on social media, and when people look at you and discuss decisions you made, right? Like everyone was throwing shade at Daniel Jones for the fact that Dan Gable, I can't even pronounce his name, the New York Giants head coach, right? He said, I would trade up I would trade and move off Daniel Jones to get a Jaden Daniels, to get a Caleb Williams, or to get a Drake May. Like, he was in that boat. He said he wanted to move off Daniel Jones, and I get it. Daniel Jones has had two, serious injuries. You could probably have an improvement at the QB position, right? But it's just having a lot of outside noise, determine how everything goes, especially when, right now it's the era of everybody's having bad practices, and then everybody goes on Twitter and just starts absolutely blowing them up, right? You had Brock Purdy doing it. You had Trevor Lawrence had a bad practice. You just had Daniel Jones scrapping with the Detroit Lions today. Like, Caleb Williams had a bad practice where he was quote unquote benched from 7-on-7s, right? So there's just a lot of outside noise that I don't think Caleb Williams needs. I get it. You can't really say no to Hard Knocks, right? They want to get the biggest stories. They want to get the inside and outs and all that stuff. But, I mean, Caleb Williams has just a lot of pressure on him. So to see him kind of get that attention, that spotlight, where we know what it's going to be about. It's going to be about the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams growing as an NFL quarterback, right? So there's just going to be a lot of eyes on him, a lot of cameras on him. Again, he's used to the spotlight, right? In college football, he had cameras following him everywhere. His name, image, and likeness, biggest NIL athlete in college football last year. So there was a lot of cameras and fame and eyes and lights on him last year. But, I hope that he continues to respond to it like he did in college. Just stay humble, keep your head above the lights, right? Keep your head held high, because there's going to be some rough patches. There's going to be some rough moments, and he doesn't seem like a guy that social media seems to get to him, right? When they discussed him throwing multiple interceptions in 7-on-7s, he just laughed about it. He went on Twitter and just laughed about it, Mekhi Blackman called him out and said this was crazy, and then Caleb Williams responds with just laughing, So I think he's going to be just fine when it comes to that stuff. He does great under the light when everybody's looking at him. He has the right responses. He gives the right responses at a press conference when the media is asking questions, and I think he's going to be around, some seasoned vets. Keenan Allen's a guy that's been around the league for a while. Montez Sweat's been around the league for a while. Jalen Johnson is their vet. You know what I'm saying? He's been there for 5 years. And even DJ Moore, he's been in Carolina where it wasn't so good. And, now he's got this opportunity in Chicago, so he's been around for a while. And so he's got some older guys around him. It's not like this is a very young team. They've got some young players, sure, but I think he'll fit right in. And this is going to be an interesting series. I'm looking forward to this, seeing the ins and outs and how he approaches, week by week, and see how Chicago Bears, even maybe we get some insight being a head coach. Maybe we get Mike Uberflus saying something out of pocket. Who knows? Because, that stuff like Hard Knocks is definitely something interesting because you never know what to expect. One week, it's just a perfect, everyone's, acting PG, everyone's drawing in between the lines. And the next week, it's absolute chaos, So this is definitely something I'm looking forward to. But huge, wishing good luck for Caleb Williams to make it through the Hard Knocks series, and to continue to win games and to look good. But with that being said, I did want to get on to the next topic of discussion, and this is discussing the best over-unders for the 2024-2025 season, right? Colin Cowherd did this on his show. There's a couple picks that he did use that I will be using because I will give to you guys because, again, this is just, I guess these are great lines. These are great lines. And so the first one I will be giving you is the Eagles over 10.5 wins, right? Listen, they were 9-1, right? And they ended up with 10 wins when everything went down. So you're telling me that, that little mythological funk that they got themselves in, they can't win one game the last 7 weeks this year, So I expect them to go out there and win at least 11 games, right? Over 10.5 wins. The Dallas Cowboys did not get better. It's worse. That's a team that's very CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott reliant. You don't have a very good back. You re-signed CeeDee Lamb. You lost the people on that O-line. That defense is looking questionable. So there's a lot of stuff going on, off the field issues, not building a competent roster, So I expect the Philadelphia Eagles to, again, run the division. The Commanders are young and coming, but I don't expect them to compete. You addressed your secondary this year with Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. You still have James Bradbury, Darius Slay. Maybe James Bradbury can get some good years left in him, So I like the way this team is going. You still got that front seven. It's still lethal. You still are acquiring draft picks and depth at that front seven spots. You have a handful of edge rushers that you could really, hopefully take a bigger step this year. Losing Hassan Reddick, so Again, I absolutely love the Eagles at over 10.5 wins. I think it's going to be an absolute steal. It's actually my favorite play for the upcoming season. I just don't see a world in where you add Saquon Barkley, another dynamic guy. You should have a healthy Dallas Goedert. Your O-line is going to be great. I just don't. And you addressed your worst position. You got a new DC. You addressed that secondary that was so goddamn awful last year, right? You with 2 first-round caliber DBs, and you brought them in here. So I love this for them. I love what they did in this offseason, and 10.5 wins look absolutely easy, right? And then my second one is the Carolina Panthers over 5.5 wins, right? And, you look at the Carolina Panthers, you look at, what they've added. You've just added, why am I blanking on the new head coach? Dave Canales. Why couldn't I remember Dave Canales? Because I loved him coming from Tampa Bay and helping Baker have his best year? I don't know. But Dave Canales, an offensive-minded coach who helped Baker Mayfield have his best year. He won a playoff with him. And we can all agree Bryce Young is a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield. He has better the potential to be so, right? He's a better dual threat athlete. I believe he has a better arm talent. Some of the throws he can make is just remarkable. And, from what I've been seeing in minicamp is that Bryce Young is looking very, very good. Why? Because he finally got a competent head coach. You address this O-line. You spent a lot of money investing into this O-line. And then you just brought in Deontay Johnson, who's worked on a contract here. He's trying to look great, who looks phenomenal this offseason, right? And again, I said Deontay Johnson was going to be a great receiver. You pair him alongside Adam Thielen, Xavier Legette, right? Maybe you get some guys from this past year's draft to maybe take some steps going forward. But I absolutely love this for Bryce Young. You've seen Xavier Legette get involved early on in minicamp. Deontay Johnson taking over. Adam Thielen having his moments. You get a hopefully healthy J.C. Horn this offseason. You did move off of Brian Burns, right? So, we'll see how that goes with your new additions. But you also lock Frank Louvu, which that hurts, But again, this team is going to be in the right direction. Bryce Young had the worst receivers in the NFL last year. Absolute garbage. PPF ranked them the worst in getting in separation, the worst receiving core in the NFL last year, right? And a lot of people are sleeping on Bryce Young. Let me tell you, he's about to wake up a lot of people. Okay, you look at a lot of these games they had last year where they lost by 1 possession or 10 points. Listen, you had they lost to the Saints by 3 points. They lost to Seattle by 10. They lost to Houston. They beat Houston last year, right? They lost to Chicago by 3. They lost to the Colts by 2 touchdowns, that was Bryce Young's 3 interception day. It was a bad day for him. You lost to Tennessee by a touchdown. You lost to Tampa Bay by 3 points. You go on, you beat Atlanta, right? You lose to Green Bay by a field goal. You lose to Tampa Bay 9-0, which again, how do you manage to score 0 points? I don't know, but I'm telling you right now, Dave Canales is going to help fix that. You're going to see a better version of Bryce Young. You're going to see a lot of strides, and I expect him to be possibly the second best team in this division. I really do believe Bryce Young is going to take some huge jumps this year, and he's going to put a lot of doubters to sleep this year, right? But you look at those situations outside the 2 wins, there's 5 games where you lost by, 6 games where you lost by 1 possession. You lost by 1 possession, a field goal, a touchdown or less, so there's so many games where you were in it, right? Again, can your defense play that good with losing Brian Burns? You still have Derek Jones. You'll still have a healthy J.C. Horn. So we'll see. But I expect Bryce Young to come out here and really take over, and have a great year this year. And then if you look at his schedule this upcoming year, you play your division. So that's 2 games against the Saints, 2 games against Tampa Bay. That's 2 games against the Atlanta Falcons, who look good this year, right? But again, it's still your division. Division games are tough, right? And then you look at the schedule. They play the Commanders, Denver, the Raiders, who some teams will say were a sorry roster. I think we would win that game, obviously, but again, you would have the quarterback advantage if you compare him to Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, right? That's a winnable game. But then you have, obviously, like I said, the Commanders, Denver, the Giants, and then you play your whole division. Then you play Arizona, so 5.5 wins for this team. I could really, really see it. It could really happen. And I really, really like this bet. Over 6 wins? Give me 6 wins. I'll take 6 wins in that weak division. They got a weaker schedule. They do play the Chargers early in the year as well. What that defense looked like last year was god awful. So, who knows? And I think Deontay Johnson's going to take an elite step. And then the next over-under, I mean, I got the Falcons over 9.5 wins, right? 10 wins. You look at their division, last year, I mean, look at close games. You lost to Tennessee by 5. You lost to Minnesota by 3. Arizona by 2. You lost the Commanders by a touchdown. You beat Houston. You beat Green Bay. You beat Tampa Bay. You beat the Saints. You beat the Jets. You lost to Tampa Bay by 4. You lost to Carolina by 2. You lost to you beat Indianapolis, right? And then you end up losing to the Bears and the Saints to end the season. But listen, this team was playing with Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. Kirk Cousins has a great O-line, has Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Rondell Moore, Darnell Mooney, right? Like, this team is going to have weapons. It's going to be lethal, right? I have high expectations for this team. You still have A.J. Terrell, right? You still have Jesse Bates, who was an all-pro caliber safety last year, right? So you drafted Michael Penix, right? So I do like this team going forward. You had a lot of close wins last year. You'll be a lot more competitive this year. But then you look at the winnable games. I got 13 games that just look absolutely winnable. 14 actually. 14 games that look winnable, right? You play Pittsburgh, right? They have quarterback issues. They have quarterback questions. And I like this team against a team like Pittsburgh, right? You'll have the QB advantage. The Saints twice, Carolina twice, Tampa Bay twice. You'll play Seattle. Again, I like this team against Seattle. You play Denver. You play the Chargers. You play Minnesota. You play the Raiders, right? You play the Giants, the Commanders. These are all winnable games where you will have the quarterback one up, like the quarterback favorite on your side. You'll have the better quarterback in that matchup in a quarterback driven league. So I like them over 9.5 wins. I expect them to be able to get 10. That should be a very good season for them, and obviously winning the division. And then we got the Raiders over 6.5 wins. Again, I've discussed this on my second channel, but you look at winnable games this year, right? I mean, listen, Carolina, Denver, Pitt, Kansas City, Denver, Tampa Bay, Atlanta, New Orleans, the Chargers. We play Jacksonville, who you don't know how it's going to be. They're not, it's like they're a dominant team that's just going to beat everybody out, right? We always split with the Chargers, right? So that's 1-1, right? We haven't lost to Denver in 4 years? Okay, we'll play Baltimore. I took that as a loss. Cleveland, I took that as a loss. The Rams, and Cincinnati, 2 teams that you can take them as a loss, but you know what I'm saying? And then last year, what did we do on Christmas? We won a game with our defense. Our defense won us games against Kansas City, right? So I expect us to split against them. And then last year, we lost to Miami by a touchdown, right? Aiden O'Connell had 4 picks that game. So you're telling me if Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell just doesn't throw 4 picks and we're going to be in this game, they got worse defensively. We got better defensively. We took one of their best players from their team, brought him in, Max Crosby, Malcolm Coombs, Tyree Wilson. Remember the name. We have Robert Spillane, right? So I expect big things from this team. Not big things, but I expect us to win more than 6.5 games, right? I expect us to win at least 7 games, okay? So those are the 4 over-unders I got for this year. Let me know if you agree or disagree, but listen, I am feeling very confident in these. The favorites from 1 to 4, if I had to rank them, number 1, I got to go with the Eagles. Number 2, I got to go with the Raiders. Right? 3, the Falcons, and 4, the Panthers. The Panthers, I think, are going to give them regardless, but in order on how much I like them going in the next year, that's 1 through 4. Okay, but then we get into the situation we did want to discuss. Brandon Aiyuk, obviously, listen, you've heard him. He's wanted to get traded for a very, very long time. He's expressed how unhappy he is in San Francisco. We've seen Jawan Jennings, Trent Williams is possibly about to get paid again. Christian McCaffrey just got extended. You've seen all these guys really get paid and get restructured and get extended, right? And Brandon Ayuk's the only one that doesn't have anything going towards his deal, and again, we've discussed previously that he doesn't really have any leverage, he's kind of stuck. He's just going to be there, and if the Niners wanted to be real jackasses, they could franchise tag him twice, So there's a lot of stuff that's out of his control. They would love to keep him here, but I mean, you have Ricky Pearsall, you just extended Jawan Jennings, you still have Deebo Samuel. So how will this team fit without him? We'll see. Kyle Shanahan can definitely get the best out of his receivers. Brandon Aiyuk, again, I think he really helps this team, and not having Brandon Aiyuk will hurt their passing game this upcoming year, because Deebo Samuel, not a great route runner. He gets drawn plays that he gets drawn up open. Kyle Shanahan does a great job getting him open, getting him the ball in space, and he does the rest, right? So you will probably see a more volume for George Kittle this upcoming season if Brandon Aiyuk does get traded. But from the 4 teams that were in the trade conversations, you had New England, you had Cleveland, the Commanders, and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh and the Commanders are both out of this conversation. Trade talks are going currently with the New England Patriots and the Cleveland Browns, right? And so this, to me, again, this seems like a great spot. Again, I wanted him to go to New England. I think pairing him alongside Drake May or Joe Milton, however you want to look at that, that little controversy going on. But you put him in New England, you have the cap space to pay someone like that. You won't have to pay a quarterback for 5 years, right? You have always been very great defensively, right? And if you can Ramondre Stevenson, who I think is a great back, right? You just extended him, you brought him back, and I think this team has, a better chance to succeed offensively. Drake May or Joe Milton. I'm gonna stop saying Joe Milton, okay? But Drake May will have more a true number one in this team, which is something that if he goes a whole year without having, it's gonna be another Bryce Young situation again. You're gonna have one of the worst receiving cores, and it's just gonna be him out there just getting rolled up the entire season. So I would love this for him. Brandon Aiyuk would be the number one guy who he would get a lot of attention, but he get a lot of opportunities, right? You can pay him as good as you see him, right? You'd be able to give the draft capital if you can make sure that, you won't have to spend a draft pick next year on a receiver. You'll have one, right? You'll have a quarterback. So I would love this move for Drake May and Brandon Aiyuk, right? It would probably be draft capital because I don't see anybody out there, that they would want. Matthew Judon is somebody that he's looking for a new contract, but again, San Francisco can't arguably, go on and pay him, right? With everything else they have invested in other players, okay? But if you were to trade him to Cleveland, right, which I would love that, right? Because you have one situation where you are going to go out there, you're going to get paid, you can kind of help change the culture out there in New England, right? Or help get the team back on track, right? Or if you were to see him go to Cleveland, you're looking at a possibly, Brandon Aiyuk for Amari Cooper trade type scenario, is something that I've heard, which again, I think Amari Cooper would be phenomenal for Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco 49ers team, right? Because he's a guy that's not going to demand the ball like a Brandon Aiyuk, like a Justin Jefferson, like a Devontae Adams, right? But he's going to perform like one. He's absolutely phenomenal route runner, one of the better route runners in the league. He's very, very underappreciated. I rank him very highly when I talk about receivers. He's always there. He's never really in the top 10 discussion because he's never gotten those type of numbers, that type of volume. But again, he's a quiet guy. He works hard. The Cleveland Browns just upped his pay because they appreciate what he's done. He's been quiet. He's came in. He's worked. He's been great. He's been the number one wide receiver. And he's a phenomenal player. Just does everything right. He blocks. He's a great attitude. So again, I would love to see a guy like that go in San Francisco if it's possible, if that's what they do go down. If they decide not to trade Amari Cooper and they just want to give Deshaun Watson another elite weapon, I would love that for them. That's a great place. Obviously, you'd have to move some money around, so I'm not sure what their cap situation looks like. You give up some draft picks, but that's a team that's in a win now situation. So giving up a team a draft pick next year or in 2 years from now, again, it's not. You're doing that with ease. You're not second guessing it. You're going to get that deal done. At this current moment, I do believe it comes down to Brandon Aiyuk, what he truly wants to do, where he wants to go. So the ball seems to be in his court from what I've heard. But again, either one of these situations would be okay with me. You give Deshaun Watson another legitimate receiving threat, which is something he hasn't had in a while, right? You allow him to kind of be more free-flowing, hot, air raid, throw the ball pass heavy type team, and then you'll still have Nick Chubb coming off an injury, which, we don't know what we're going to see from him this year, coming off an ACL injury. So I'm liking the two teams in contention for Brandon Aiyuk right now. I'd love to see him on either or. Obviously, if I want to build better storylines and better teams, I would love to see him go to New England and try to turn that team around and him and Drake May, build something for the future. I would just love to see that. And then we get into the NFL Top 100, right? And so the NFL Top 100, again, like I discussed earlier, apparently was voted on after Christmas break, right? After you got that Christmas week, right? It's like week 12, week 13-ish, around that time, right? And so a lot of these rankings were at that time, at that current moment. So players who were hurt or maybe not playing as great at that current moment, got a little nudge on the list, right? And you've seen that, right? You've seen our top 5 list. Let me pull it up at this current moment. Top 5 ended up being number 1, Tyreek Hill, number 2, Lamar Jackson, number 3, Christian McCaffrey, number 4, Patrick Mahomes, 5, Myles Garrett, 6, Chris Jones, 7, Trent Williams, 8, TJ Watt, 9, Travis Kelce, who's a bit high on that list if we're talking about what he did last year and at that certain moment, right? And then 10, Max Crosby, which shout out to Max Crosby, well deserved. You got 3 edge rushers in that, or 4 edge rushers in that top 10, which I absolutely love to see. And then obviously Tyreek Hill is the only one in that top 10 for receivers. But the true controversy with this list was the fact that Lamar Jackson was ranked ahead of Patrick Mahomes, right? I heard a lot of people knock Lamar Jackson for being ahead of Patrick Mahomes, although he did win an MVP, so you arguably could have put him first in the NFL, right? The fact that, he wasn't number 1 after he just won MVP is kind of insane if you really think about it, right? But, I mean, listen, if regardless of whatever happened, this is based on the regular season of last year. So, Lamar Jackson being number 2 or, in my eyes, could have been number 1 easily. That's exactly what that's right. That's fitting. That sits right with me, right? And then you've got the Tyreek Hill being number 1, because when this was voted on, it was before Tyreek Hill was hurt. He had gone 9 games in a row of 100+ receiving yards. He was on pace to break the single season receiving record, right? So, and then obviously he kind of fell off that last month of the season, right? 4 games in a row without going over 100 yards. So it's definitely question marks, in the Patrick Mahomes. That's exactly when that stretch where, he had 6 touchdowns to 5 interceptions in that month, right? So this is a lot of, controversial stuff. TJ Watt at this current moment, I believe, was hurt, right? He had been hurt for a couple weeks. So again, it's just really how you see it and how you want to judge people, right? Christian McCaffrey being 3, I think, well deserved. Mahomes at 4 again. Shout out to Big Max Crosby for being number 10, to get on the list with what he had to go through last year defensively and how much attention he drew to himself. I love this for him, and I expect him to have an even bigger year this upcoming year, so I'm interested to see how that plays out. But, I mean, listen, some of the biggest noticeable misses was for the cornerback position, right? And, I mean, listen, you have Deron Bland was the highest rated cornerback on this list, right? Deron Bland was the highest rated cornerback on this list. I mean, you kind of seen a Stephon Diggs-like year where you had a lot of interceptions, you were a Pro Bowler, you were considered an All-Pro player, but when you looked at the yards allowed given up when you were guarded, I mean, it's the same situation as Trevon Diggs. He was targeted so much because they were so successful throwing at him, right? So, I mean, you had another year exactly like that where he kind of got overrated, I'm not going to lie, putting him ahead of Sauce Gardner. Patrick Surtain, I believe, was 50th on this list, which is absolutely insane. I mean, you have Jalen Johnson, Trent McDuffie, 2 All-Pros who didn't even make the top 100, and Jalen Johnson aired his frustration on a press conference, right? He called out Aaron Rodgers for making the list at 97 or whatever it was, right? But, there's a lot of people on this list that when you look at it, some of it's just mind blowing, and like L'Jarius Sneed was another guy who missed the list, right? He wasn't all pro, but he was one of the better cornerbacks in football. And we also seen what he did in the playoffs against Tyreek Hill in the playoffs. Absolutely strapped him up, owned him. That was his day, made Tyreek Hill look like a little baby. And that was one of the best things I could have seen, seeing Tyreek Hill talk all this trash this entire year and get absolutely jammed to the ground multiple times in a playoff game. It can't go any better than that, especially by your own team. And he comes off the field talking all that yada yada. But L'Jarius Sneed was one of the better cornerbacks in football this year. And to see that he's not put in the top 100 was just disrespectful. I mean, listen, he was out here. I believe he's now the highest paid cornerback in football at this current moment, right? But I mean, listen, it's interesting depending on how you want to look at it and all these things. But let's see, the highest rated cornerback was actually Jalen Ramsey at 25. So Jalen Ramsey at 25. So Deron Bland came out for that, and Sauce Gardner, and so on and so on. Kyle Hamilton putting on for the safety, ranked number 1 safety at 43. I mean, again, the other ones were pretty self-explanatory. The highest edge rusher was obviously Myles Garrett. 16 quarterbacks listed in the top 100. Lamar at 2, Patrick Mahomes at 4, Josh Allen at 12. And then obviously you had Aaron Rodgers at, I believe, 96, Jared Goff at 48, Matthew Stafford 42, Joe Burrow 39, Tua at 36, which is god-awful. I don't know why he's that high. 34, Jordan Love, 28, Brock Purdy. Let me see. Patrick Surtain, that's 52. It's going the wrong way. Kirk Cousins, 81. Justin Herbert, 75. Trevor Lawrence at 94, which was absolutely crazy. His team was 8-3 at that current moment, or around 8-3, when this list came out. So to see that he was getting dissed on like that is kind of crazy. But yeah, Jalen Hurts at 15, which there's a little bias there, right? Trevor Lawrence arguably looked better than him through that 11 game sample, 12 game sample. CJ Stroud at 20, which is good for him. Justin Jefferson finished behind CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill. Arguable, but it is what it is. AJ Brown being 21, well respected, he deserves it. 23, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Personally, Amon-Ra St. Brown was an All-Pro this year. I would have gave him the nod, even with the supernatural funk that happened in Philadelphia to end the season. But this list is very, very interesting, and it all comes down to really how you want to look at it. You had a guy like Kirk Cousins at 81, and Aaron Rodgers at what did he end up at? 92. So there's a lot of questionable things going on in this list, right? And then another couple noticeable top 100s that missed the list. You have Derek Stingley Jr., Chardavius Ward, right? Another two great cornerbacks who didn't make the list. All being said, the cornerbacks did not get any love in this year's top 100. Again, the cornerback position is I feel like it's very deep, that very top heavy, like top 1 through 15. There's a lot of such great talent. I believe like the top 3 to 4 is really like solidified in any order how you really think about it. You have Patrick Surtain, you've got Sauce Gardner. Me personally, I would have McDuffie in that top 5 conversation with what he did last year. Just absolutely remarkable. Jalen Johnson to me would be looking outside in, from like more like 7 to 8 range, looking outside with Snead in that discussion as well. Jalen Ramsey to me again is still a top 5 corner. Jair Alexander, top 5 corner. Those 5 guys are really, to me, solidified in the top 5 position at this current moment in their position. Those other guys, they've got to bring it for a couple more years because these guys have been just dominant since they've came in. Jalen Ramsey's been doing his whole career. Jay Alexander's been doing his whole career. The only person that really gives Justin Jefferson problems is Jair Alexander. Patrick Surtain, I've seen him line up against Devontae Adams multiple times, in his career, and he is just, again, such a great talent. It's a great receiver, a great DB. So to see some of those guys get underlooked is obviously unfortunate. But the QB situation, again, it kind of just, I don't know. This list is to me, it's this list. I have no words for this list. So many people out of place. So many people that are just disrespected and not given any credit, right, for what they've done. I'm sure situation and winning probably helped or hurt certain players too as well. A guy like Jalen Johnson, being on the Bears, not a very competitive team, and then Patrick Surtain was also on that team that gave up 70 points to the Dolphins, so that kind of hurts his rep a little bit. But, anyways, this list was just absolutely mind-blowing. Hopefully next year is a better list because, last year I have not as many issues with the list last year as I did this year. This year was kind of just wild, and looking at all the misses that I would say happened and poor rankings, some of the stuff is just crazy, but it is what it is. NFL players are going to vote on their buddies and be a little biased at times and look at people differently. I've had Micah Parsons come out here on podcasts and say why he's better than TJ Watt, why Myles Garrett is better than TJ Watt, which is just, if you watch the film, it's not true, right? Numbers say one thing, but it's not true, right? And it's a lot. I can just go on for hours about discussing little stuff like that, but I won't because unfortunately it is the end of today's episode. But again, if you did enjoy, let me know what y'all think. Like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And if you're watching this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to follow the show, give it a 5-star rating. It helps the algorithm. And if you enjoy the content, like Kenny Beecham says, Kenny B, tell a friend, and tell a friend, and tell a friend. We out.